The first thing I saw wasn't tea smoke, or police tape, or an apology letter nailed to a post. It was silence, the kind that makes your ears ring. My mountain mansion was gone. Not damaged. Not under renovation. Gone. Flattened into splinters and crushed stone like someone had erased it with a giant hand. And there, half buried in dirt and broken cedar, my mailbox still stood at a crooked angle. Benjamin Powers. Printed in gold. That S when a voice cut through the wind. Sharp and nasal like a blade dragged across glass. Well, if it isn't Mr. Too Good for HOA rules himself. I turned slowly. And the woman smiling at me was holding a clipboard like she'd been waiting her whole life to use it as a weapon. I killed the engine and sat there for a second in my black Ford Bronco. Hand still on the wheel. Staring at the place where my house should be been. My mind tried to correct the image. Tried to fix it. Like maybe I took the wrong turn. Maybe the driveway wasn't mine. But the bend in the gravel road was the same. The tall pine with the lightning scar was the same. Even the way the mountain shadow fell across the clearing was the same. Only my home wasn't. I stepped out, boots hitting debris instead of driveway. The crunch under my feet wasn't gravel. It was wood. My wraparound deck, the one I built with my own hands, was now scattered into jagged planks. Snapped like toothpicks. Nails glittered in the sunlight like little threats. I walked forward slowly. Like if I moved too fast, the whole scene would collapse into something real. But it was real. My front porch was a crater. My living room was a smear of insulation. Broken glass. And twisted metal. Even the stone fireplace built from reclaimed rock I hauled up from an old mining town was cracked in half. Like the mountain itself had split it. My chest tightened so hard I had to stop breathing for a moment. I stood there a full minute. Maybe longer. Just staring, trying to understand how a person comes home to nothing. Then the wind shifted and pushed dust into my face. In that S when I saw the mailbox. Half buried. Bent. But still upright enough to do its job. It still had my name. That gold lettering caught the sun and flashed like a warning. And before I could even process the rage rising up my throat, I heard her. That voice. High-pitched. Nasal. Smug. The kind of voice that doesn't ask questions, only delivers punishments. Well, she said. If it isn't Mr. Too Good for HOA rules himself. I closed my eyes for half a second. Because I already knew exactly who it was. When I turned, there she stood like she belonged in my ruins, like this destruction was her personal victory parade. Amber Bellington, president of the Silver Ridge HOA. 50-something. Overly highlighted hair. Designer sunglasses perched like a crown. A tight smile that never reached her eyes. And she had a clipboard in her hand. Angled like a sword. She looked past me at the wreckage. Then back at my face. And smiled wider. You were late, she said. As if my home had been waiting for me to show up. My voice came out low. Controlled. Almost calm. You did this. Amber didn't flinch. She flipped through papers like she was checking a grocery list. We issued multiple warnings. Benjamin, she said, tapping the clipboard with a manicured finger. You failed to pay over $7,000 in fines. She started reading them out like she was savoring each one. Code violations. Unauthorized deck extension. Non-compliant fence height. She paused, eyes glittering. And of course, the infamous sunflower flag. I blinked. You demolished my house. Over a flag. Amber raised her eyebrows like I'd asked if water was wet. It was political imagery against HOA decorum. She said simply. I stared at her. That flag had a sunflower on it. That S irrelevant. She shrugged. Symbolism is symbolism. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I stepped closer. Where's the demolition permit? Amber. She didn't even hesitate. Approved by the board. Unanimous vote. I gave a short, humorless laugh. You mean your cousin Todd and your wine club friend Cheryl? Amber's smile sharpened. Still a vote, she said. You should read the bylaws. Benjamin. You're not above the rules just because you think you're special. Then she turned, heels clicking in the dirt, and walked back toward her white Lexus parked near the tree line like a clean, shiny insult against the ruins. I watched her go. My fists clenched. My pulse pounding in my ears. The wind lifted dust from where my porch used to be. And as she drove away, one thought settled into my bones like a promise. Amber had no idea what she'd just done. She thought I was just another quiet homeowner. Just another man who didn't fight back. She didn't know the truth. I kept a low profile when I moved up here. Grew a beard. Wore flannel. Didn't talk much. Let people think I was just some mountain guy who liked hiking and grilling steaks. Because peace is easier when nobody watches you. But Silver Ridge didn't know who I really was. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the governor of the entire state. And Amber Bellington had just declared war on the wrong man. I didn't drive back to the capital that night. Not yet. Rage makes you reckless if you let it. So instead, I drove down the mountain road and booked a room at the old lodge, the one with creaky floors and hand-carved banisters and a smell of pine and old coffee. Nobody asked questions. They remembered me from before the election, when I first moved to Silver Ridge. Back then, I was just a guy looking for fresh air and quiet mornings. Now, I was something else entirely. A man with power, and a reason to use it. In the lodge room, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the dark outline of the ridge against the sky, listening to the wind scrape the trees. I kept seeing my house in my mind standing there like it was supposed to. Then I'd blink and remember it wasn't. Sometime around 3 a.m., I reached for my phone and made a call. Not to a lawyer, not to a PR team, to the state's Department of Geographic Information. Satellite imaging, high resolution, time-stamped. And by sunrise, I had what I needed. Proof. The house standing on Wednesday. Flattened by Friday morning. No storm. No wildfire. No accident. Just a demolition crew. And no legal permit on file. The next morning, I met County Sheriff Rick Callahan. He had a handshake like a bear trap and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many people lie. His office smelled like coffee and old paper. A toothpick sat between his teeth like it was welded there. He didn't waste time. You retelling me they leveled your entire house? He asked, voice rough. I didn't answer with words. I dropped a folder on his desk. Satellite images. Time stamps. Location stamps. Property records. Permit searches. He flipped through slowly. And with every page, his brow tightened. They told us it was an accessory structure. He muttered. A shed. Something small. Didn't he even go through zoning? He added, voice darkening. They lied. I said flatly. And that's not a civil issue. That's criminal misrepresentation. Rick leaned back, exhaled through his nose, and nodded like a man who just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. You want me to bring them in? Not yet, I said. He looked up. I want to know who signed off on the crew in the first place. The company. The contract. The payment. Follow the money. Rick tapped the folder. I'll get my deputy on it. He said, but if what you're saying checks out, this isn't just HOA overstepping. His eyes hardened. This is fraud. Conspiracy. Property destruction. He paused, then added, half to himself. You always did think like a prosecutor. I didn't respond. Not out loud. By noon, I was sitting in a folding chair at the back of the community pool house. Jeans. Windbreaker. State ID badge clipped to my shirt. No speech. No announcement. I didn't need one. The Silver Ridge HOA board was meeting in their usual closed door style, but I had a court order in my hand signed by a district superior judge compelling them to open the meeting to residents, citing ongoing investigations, citing the public's right to transparency. The door opened. Cheryl Evans, HOA secretary, stared at me like she'd just seen a ghost walk in wearing boots. Her lips parted. No words came out. She just stepped back. I walked past her into the room. Amber was at the head of the table, sipping from a tall insulated cup, scrolling her tablet like nothing in the world could touch her. Her heels clicked as she stood. For half a second, her expression flickered. Surprise. Then she forced it into polite tightness. I wasn't aware we had guests. She said, "You're aware now?" I replied, walking toward the center. This meeting is public. Her jaw twitched, but she didn't argue. not with a dozen residents now filing in behind me, whispering, curious, hungry for answers. I'd like to address the board regarding a matter of urgent legal concern. I said. No need. Amber snapped, folding her arms. We already aware of your grievances. Good. I said. Then you also aware that the structure you demolished wasn't an accessory building. I let my words settle. It was a state-registered primary residence. Full occupancy permits, verified by the county assessor. Amber glanced at Todd, the treasurer, who looked like he'd rather chew glass than be there. You claimed unpaid fines as justification. I continued. Fines which, according to your own ledgers, were never formally invoiced, never sent certified, and never itemized with applicable bylaw references. Amber's face tightened. We have internal processes. Not anymore. I interrupted. As of this morning, I said clearly. The state has frozen all HOA financial operations pending investigation. The room reacted like a wave. Gasps. Murmurs. A chair scraping back. Even Cheryl looked stunned. You can do that. Amber hissed. We're a private entity. You have no jurisdiction. I pulled a single sheet of paper from my folder and handed it to her. Emergency executive order. I said. Signed under state authority. Amber's hands shook just slightly as she read. I watched her eyes move across the page like they were crawling. You allow note the language. I added. In cases of fraud, misrepresentation, or destruction of private property under false pretenses, community governance bodies are subject to legal audit. Amber stared at the paper like it might catch fire. And just so we're clear, I continued. I am recusing myself from any oversight role. The Attorney General's office is assigning a special investigator. Independent. Neutral. Todd muttered under his breath. You're trying to ruin us. I looked at him. No. I said calmly. You did that when you hired a demolition crew using embezzled community funds. Silence slammed into the room. Cheryl's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table. Wait. She whispered. What? I turned toward her. The check that paid for the crew came from the Community Improvement Fund. I said. Listed as landscape leveling. You signed off on it. Cheryl. You and Todd. Amber's eyes darted between them like trapped animals. I didn't know what it was for. Cheryl protested. Voice shaking. You initialed the disbursement. I said. Either you were negligent or complicit. Todd stood up so fast his chair fell backward. I am not going down for this. He snapped. Amber filled out the forms. She told us it was park maintenance. You were lying. Amber hissed. No. Todd shouted. You were lying. You've been siphoning funds for months. Amber. I saw the receipts for patio heaters at your house paid for with HOA money. The room erupted into whispers. Residents looked at each other like the floor had shifted under them. Amber's face turned a shade too pale. Enough. I said, raising a hand. The door opened again. Sheriff Rick Callahan stepped in. 2 deputies behind him. We've seen enough. Rick said. He looked directly at Amber. Amber Bellington. Todd Vance. His voice was steady. Almost bored. Like this wasn't the first time someone tried to hide behind paperwork. You're both under arrest for misuse of community funds, criminal misrepresentation, and destruction of private property. Amber tried to step back, but the deputies were already moving. Hands on wrists, metal cuffs clicking shut behind her back. She stammered. You can this S&T. Rick read her rights with calm detachment. Cheryl slumped in her seat, eyes wide and distant like her brain had left the room. And I walked out before the screaming started. I didn't need to watch the cuffs tighten. Outside, the sun was climbing high over the ridge. A few neighbors stood near the pool gate, watching with stunned faces. One man nodded at me, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in Silver Ridge in a long time. Respect. I walked past him without saying a word. Because the truth was, this was only the beginning. 3 days after the arrests, I stood where my kitchen used to be. If you can call it a kitchen. There were scorched pine needles mixed into broken tile, fragments of ceramic, twisted pipes exposed like bones. A forensic survey team moved through the wreckage with measured steps, photographing, cataloging, flagging evidence with bright orange markers that fluttered in the wind like tiny warnings. One of them crouched near a half-buried support beam and called out measurements to another. Then the fire inspector arrived. Darnell, slate gray hair, a face shaped by long days and difficult truths. He stepped carefully around a pile of charred lumber. He didn't look at me right away. He looked at the debris like it was speaking a language only he understood. "You were lucky to catch this when you did," he finally said. Pulling off his gloves, he pointed to a section of floorboards, darkened in a way that didn't match normal demolition. Someone tampered with the structure before they leveled it. My stomach dropped. "What kind of tampering?" He exhaled slowly. "Accelerants. In the floorboards. Chemical traces that don't belong here." "Gasoline?" I asked, though I already knew that sounded too simple. Darnell's eyes lifted to mine. "Something more exotic," he said. "Industrial solvent. Not something you buy at a hardware store." The wind moved through the wreckage like a whisper. "This wasn't about code violations," Darnell continued, voice low. "This was planned." My throat tightened. Someone wanted this place erased. I stared at the crushed remains of the fireplace I built with reclaimed stone. There was no HOA fine on earth that explained soaking a house in industrial chemicals before knocking it down. "Send everything to the AG's office," I said. "Chain of custody. Full report." Darnell nodded and motioned to his team. And as he did, I saw a woman standing near my truck. Tailored navy slacks, tortoiseshell glasses, tablet in hand. Her posture didn't belong on a mountain property. It belonged in courtrooms and federal buildings. "Governor Powers," she said crisply. "I am Special Investigator Lena Brooks, assigned by the Attorney General's office." I stared at her for a moment. Then I gave a short, bitter exhale. "Let me guess," I said. "This is bigger than patio heaters." Lena tapped her tablet. A map appeared: Silver Ridge and surrounding parcels. We've uncovered transfers routed through shell companies tied to the HOA Improvement Fund. She said, "Over the last 16 months, over $250,000 has been funneled into off-book accounts." I raised an eyebrow. "Personal enrichment," she said. "Partly, but most of it was used to purchase surrounding properties at auction." She zoomed in on highlighted lots. Parcels that went into foreclosure after residents were hit with inflated fines. I felt the pieces click into place in my head like a lock turning. "They were driving people out," I said slowly, "so they could buy the land." "Correct," Lena said. "And once they controlled enough surrounding lots, they planned to consolidate and sell to a development firm." Lena swiped again. "Another file. We've subpoenaed the firm's records. They had a standing agreement to purchase the entire ridge once the HOA secured 75% of the acreage." I stared at the valley beyond the trees. Silver Ridge wasn't just amber being petty. It was a land grab. A long con disguised as neighborhood governance. "Where's the money now?" I asked. "Frozen," Lena said. "The state treasurer cooperated immediately, but we believe they were preparing to move it offshore." She looked at me. Expression firm. "You stopped this just in time." An unmarked SUV rolled up behind us. Two men in suits got out. One handed Lena a folder, then glanced at me. "We got confirmation," he said. "The demolition crew was subcontracted through a shell contractor with no operating license." He paused. "The owner is Todd Vance's brother-in-law. Paid in cash," he added. Lena snapped the folder shut. "We'll move forward with federal charges," she said. "This crosses state lines." As they walked away, I sat on the tailgate of my truck and stared out over the valley. The ridge was quiet again. No HOA board pacing with clipboards. No petty threats taped to doors. Just wind through trees. But quiet didn't mean safe. Quiet meant the monsters had been caught, and now we had to see how far their web reached. That afternoon, I called a town hall. No podium. No microphone. Just a community center filled to the walls. Every seat taken. People standing in aisles. Retirees. Teachers. Young couples holding kids on their hips. Men with work hands. Women with tired eyes. All of them carrying the same question. How did we let this happen? I stood at the front. I didn't come as a politician. I came as a neighbor. I didn't come here today as your governor. I said, I came here as one of you. Heads nodded. What was done to this community wasn't just unethical. I continued. It was criminal. A murmur rippled through the room. You were lied to. Manipulated. Your homes were leveraged against you. I saw a man in the fourth row clench his jaw so tight the muscle jumped. And when some of you couldn't pay the fines they invented, I said, they took your land and sold it behind your backs. The room shifted like a collective inhale. But that ends now, I said firmly. The Silver Ridge HOA has been dissolved. Gasps again, then scattered claps. The board is under federal investigation. I continued. And starting today, a provisional council made up of volunteer residents will oversee community decisions until we can hold transparent elections. The clapping grew louder. Not because they loved politics, because they were desperate for fairness. And there's more. I said, every fine issued in the last 2 years will be reviewed. Every fabricated charge. Every retaliatory penalty. I paused. If it was illegitimate, it will be voided and refunded. A woman near the front wiped her eyes and whispered something to the man beside her. I know trust doesn't come back overnight, I said, but it starts with truth. I looked across the crowd. And with your help, we were going to rebuild this place. Not just the homes, the principles they thought they were living under. After the meeting, people approached one by one. A retired firefighter with a construction background volunteered to lead the rebuilding of my house. Others offered testimony. Names, dates, letters they kept, photos of violations that never existed. It wasn't just anger. It was purpose. Later that week, I met with the state legislature's housing committee, and we moved fast. A bill placing strict oversight protocols on HOAs, mandatory audits, public access to records, criminal penalties for predatory enforcement. It passed unanimously. By the following month, Amber and Todd were formally indicted on 12 counts. Fraud, racketeering, property destruction with intent to defraud. Cheryl cooperated. Suspended sentence in exchange for testimony. The developer backed out. Public pressure and media exposure scorched their name. Their stock dropped 8% in a week. And Silver Ridge changed. People who never spoke now shared tools. Neighbors rebuilt fences together. Open meetings streamed online. The fear was gone. I didn't rebuild my mansion the way it was. I designed something smaller, simpler. A deep porch, wide windows facing the valley. And when I sat there with coffee in hand, I didn't think about the wreckage. I thought about what we built after. A community that finally belonged to its people again. A month after the town hall, I was stacking firewood behind the frame of my new porch when Lena called. She didn't waste time. We found something buried in the HOA's internal server backups. She said, encrypted files. Took a while, but we cracked them this morning. I dropped the kindling into a crate. Wiped my hands on a rag. What kind of files? Audio, she said. Board meeting recordings. Not the official ones. Off the books. Recorded on a private device belonging to Todd Vance. My stomach tightened. Play it. A second later, grainy audio filled the line. Then Amber's voice came through sharper than I remembered. We can wait for another legal process. The governor's too high profile. We need a clean break. Remove the structure and bury the paper trail. A pause. Another voice, Todd. Uncertain. And if it backfires? Amber's tone turned cold. It won't. The crew's off record. The permits are ghosted. By the time he figures it out, the land's already transferred. Silence. Then Cheryl's voice. Hesitant. And if the press finds out? Amber replied like she was bored. We blame miscommunication. He's a politician. He want it buried. The file ended. Lena's voice returned. Quiet but firm. That recording alone nails conspiracy. She said. But there's more. I could hear papers moving on her end. The second file. The following day, I leaned my shoulder against the porch frame, staring out at the ridge. This time, Lena continued. Amber's talking to someone else. Male. Older. Not on any board roster. Did you get a name? I asked. We ran a voice print. She said. And then she spoke the name that made my blood run colder than the mountain wind. Byron Kepler. I knew that name. Byron Kepler didn't he live in Silver Ridge? He lived in a penthouse in Denver and ran a private equity firm specializing in distressed property acquisition. The kind of man who wore 2 watches and never answered his own phone. He promised Amber a commission. Lena said, 5% of the development deal if she secured the ridge. I closed my eyes. She sold out the entire community. Lena continued. For a payout and a property in Vail. She paused. She signed a purchase agreement 2 days before the demolition cash offer. I looked out at the tree line. I want a federal prosecutor on this. I said, already in motion. Lena replied, Kepler's firm is under investigation for racketeering. Get the IRS involved too. I said, a man like him didn't he report that kind of side payout? Lena's voice turned even sharper. We're moving. 3 days later. Byron Kepler was arrested at a private airfield outside Aspen. He was attempting to board a chartered jet to the Cayman Islands. U.S. Marshals pulled him off the tarmac like he was just another man trying to run from consequences. They found 2 burner phones, a briefcase with currency from 5 different countries, and a flash drive containing a list of other HOA partners across 3 states. Meanwhile, back in Silver Ridge, the residents kept rebuilding. A legal defense fund was created for families still fighting to reclaim property. A retired legal clerk organized files. A librarian offered space for document scanning and printing. At the next council meeting, I sat at the back and listened. The energy was different now. Focused. Determined. No fear. An older man stood Hank. His voice cracked when he spoke. I lost my wife's garden. He said. The last thing she planted before she passed. They bulldozed it like it was nothing. The room was silent. Then Hank lifted his chin. But I am not here to cry about it. He said, I am here to say I am planting something new. Applause followed steady. Honest. After the meeting, I walked outside into the cool evening air and found Lena waiting near the flagpole. You were not staying for the vote? She asked. They don't need me for that. I said, they've got it handled. She nodded once. Kepler's arraignment is Monday. Federal court. What is he facing? I asked. Conspiracy to defraud. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. She said. And 4 counts of racketeering. I exhaled. Amber and Todd. I asked. Turning state as evidence. Lena said. Cowards do when the walls close in. She looked toward the building, where residents were still talking in clusters. Kepler's firm has ties to 12 other HOAs. She said, this is just the beginning. I stared up at the stars starting to break through the mountain clouds. Funny thing about corruption, I said quietly. It's always loud. Until people start paying attention. Lena's mouth twitched into a faint smile. Then it gets real quiet. She finished. Over the next months, the state legislature passed 3 new laws governing HOA operations. Mandatory third-party audits. Public disclosures for all board financial decisions. And the big one, a state-run ombudsman agency empowered to investigate HOA abuse without waiting for complaints. Silver Ridge became the model. Kepler's trial drew national attention. Lena testified. I testified. The jury took less than 2 days. Conviction. 20 years without parole. His firm dissolved. Assets liquidated. A portion of proceeds went into a restitution fund for communities he tried to gut. Amber, Todd, and Cheryl were banned for life from holding governance positions in any residential community. Their plea deals included community service, restitution payments, and public apologies broadcast during prime time. The mansion I lost never came back, but the porch I built afterward, it stood taller in a way no blueprint could capture. Every board cut by someone who lived here. Every nail hammered by someone who cared. And when winter came, the fire inside burned steady. One afternoon, snow started falling soft as ash. A boy no older than 10 rode his bike up the gravel path to my porch and handed me a folded paper. A hand-drawn map of Silver Ridge. Lots, trails, creek. In the corner, he'd written, "Thanks for saving our town." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and pedaled away. Tires crunching snow. I pinned that map above my workbench and stood there a long time. They tried to take everything. But in the end, they gave us back something better. a reason to fight, a reason to stay, and a reason to believe that no matter how far corruption reaches, there's always a way to cut it down. Root and branch. If you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next.